I know that you have had a chance to talk to law enforcement about what we're seeing in some of these videos. A senior law enforcement official tells you that this appears to be what we're looking at here, the suspect.
Yeah, that's exactly right, Erin. And this is at the end of the incident where he crashed his pickup truck into a bus and then stopped. And this is where police encountered him and at some point shot him. I'm told he was actually shot, they believe now, in the abdomen. And there's an exit wound, and so he was rushed into surgery. But interestingly enough, police were able to speak to him. They were with him as he was being brought into the hospital, into the operating room, and they were trying to talk to him. It's unclear what they've learned in those conversations.
All right, Shimon, and as you break this news, I know you're going to be back with us through the hour. Thank you. Sure. I want to go now to John Williams, who's with me, arrived on the scene 30 seconds after the gunshots started. So you get to the scene, these gunshots just start. What did you see?
Yeah. Well, what happened was I was walking down the side of the West Side Highway on the bike path, walking north, and right away these two women with a group of maybe 10 children are sprinting towards me. You know, I think they're just kids running. I don't think much of it. But as they pass me, I hear one of the young girls saying something about he has a gun, he has a gun. So immediately I turn around because, I mean, that's just what you would do if you hear someone has a gun. But maybe 30 seconds to a minute after that, I hear a couple gunshots. It's maybe 5 gunshots back to back to back, really fast. So I immediately turn around. I want to go see what happened. The first thing that stands out to me is I first got there and it was just the whole, everything, just the smell of burning gunpowder just really stuck out in my mind. But then I saw one man who was laying face first on the ground. I believe he was the suspect. He appeared to be in pain. It would make sense that he was shot in the abdomen. Yes. I also saw another man who was next to him, who the police were putting him in handcuffs. He wasn't resisting, anything like that. He was on his knees. He had his hands behind his head. Everything seemed fine. So I'm not sure who that man was. This was all about 20 feet away from the Home Depot pickup truck. Which
at that point is mangled.
It's the entire front of it is completely pushed in. There's smoke coming out of it.
And when you saw those two men, one of which you think was the suspect, were they saying anything? Any look on their face? Anything you can describe about them?
Not much that I can hear. Like I said, the man that was on the ground appeared to be in pain. And the other man, he wasn't resisting. He wasn't, trying to run at that point or anything like that. The really interesting thing that happened, in my opinion, is during all of this, one of the police officers claimed that there was another suspect who happened to run into the park. And at that point, 5 to 10 officers all ran into the park looking for this person. And then at that time also, the rest of the police officers that were on scene gathered everyone up and they made us go across the street, keep everyone safe.
Right.
So,
but they were at that point just really trying to figure out what was happening and whether there was someone else or an accomplice or something.
Yeah, they were just trying to figure out what was going on. Everything got blocked off. There were, from every direction, the roads were blocked off. There were police coming from every angle. It was a chaos.
All right. Well, John, thank you very much. I appreciate you telling us what you saw. And I want to go with that straight to our panel who are going to be with me throughout the hour. Bob Baer, former CIA operative, Juliette Kayyem, the former Assistant Secretary of Homeland Security, Paul Cruikshank, a terrorism analyst, and Art Roderick, U.S. Marshals former Assistant Director for Investigations. And thanks very much to all of you. Let me just start here with what we know and what we don't know. Art, we know that he is an Uzbek national. He's 29 years old. He came to this country in the year 2010. We have no idea whether he was still here legally, had overstayed a visa, had gone anywhere to travel. We know nothing. Except for that law enforcement are saying that witnesses on the scene say he yelled Allah Akbar as he got out of the vehicle. What does all this say to you, Art?
Well, it says to me that's what we in the public don't know, but I'm pretty sure at this particular point the FBI and the Joint Terrorism Task Force does know a lot of these questions that you just asked.
Yeah.
Now, the JTTFs, I mean, you got to remember, they're just not in Manhattan or in New York. There's over 100 of them around the country, and I can tell you right now, there's leads and communiques being put out to all those different terrorism task forces, not only describing what occurred here, but also if there's any leads in their particular area that need to be followed up on. And that's the key part of how we now communicate with these incidences in the United States.
Right, and just Juliet, we don't know. I mean, you just heard John, who was there, saying, you know, that at the moment, right, the suspect appeared to be on the ground after he was shot, and then police were running across the street into a park thinking someone else might have been there. At the moment, we understand this to likely be a single operator, but there are a lot of questions about this person, lone wolf, motivation. Other than the Allah Akbar, that's all we have right now.
Yeah, we don't know two significant details which are relevant for this investigation. The first is, of course, are there co-conspirators? So he may have been acting alone today, but did someone help him rent the truck? You know, who did he talk to about it? Did this require planning? Now, from the looks of it, this does not require much planning. So it is very possible that he acted solely alone, rented the truck, and did this alone. The second question, of course, the big one is, what were his ties to any radicalization process, either online or travel? That, too, is being investigated right now. We know, and Paul will probably speak to this in greater detail, that that ISIS has not taken credit for this, but they are, you know, these ISIS networks are sort of heralding and celebrating what happened. There was a Halloween statement, a statement about attacks on Halloween by a French-aligned ISIS group. So that's basically where the investigation will lead, both internally, domestically, what happened, and then, of course, the international ties.
And Bob, let me just show the video again that we have. The law enforcement tell our Shimon Prokupez is, as we see it here, they believe this to be the suspect. It's hard to tell whether he's wearing a jacket and pants or some sort of a jumpsuit, but he's running, and this is after he gets out of that rented Home Depot truck. Did he plan to survive and get away? Does it look that way to you, Bob?
I don't think he did. I think that he knew there'd be police all over. He got those fake guns out so he'd be shot. He looks like to me he wanted martyrdom. Whether he was affiliated with the Islamic State or Al-Qaeda doesn't really matter. I think he planned to die, take as many people with him. You know, as Juliet was saying, this is probably a lone wolf attack. It doesn't take much. You just get on the internet, look for your permission to take a car, like in Berlin and Paris, and you rent a car, and it's that easy in a soft target like New York City or any urban area in the United States, and you've got a major attack. And there's not much the FBI can do about it, because there's no Islamic State to get in touch with to get this approved or coordinate or the rest of it. And this just comes out of the blue, and it's just a horrible, horrible tragedy. And I think we're going to find out that it was nobody's fault. Nobody could have stopped this.
I mean, that's the thing, Paul. It just depends whether law enforcement had any idea who this individual was, whether his name, I knew, you know, obviously with the Tsarnaev brothers, we had gotten, there was information, right? They had been on lists. There had been things and signs that perhaps were missed. In this case, we don't know any of that at this point. But we do know he's been in this country since the year 2010, so somewhere around 7 years. And we don't know, again, whether he overstayed a visa or whether he was here fully legally. We just do not know this information. We do know, though, that he was an Uzbek national.
That's right, Erin, and one of the things they'll be investigating is potential travel back and forth to Uzbekistan. There has been a significant problem with jihadism in Uzbekistan. There are two large jihadi groups there. One of them, the Islamic Movement of Uzbekistan, is affiliated with ISIS. There are up to 1,500 Uzbeks that have traveled to Syria and Iraq to join jihadi groups over there. And there's a lot of jihadi propaganda in Uzbek that is out there. And in fact, just a few months ago in Stockholm, there was another truck attack in which an Uzbek national inspired by ISIS was involved. That was in April of this year in Stockholm. So they'll be looking at potential foreign travel, potential international connections. They'll also be looking at whether this individual might have been in touch with an ISIS operative overseas over encrypted apps, but it's very, very difficult for authorities to ascertain that because of it's encrypted.
And let me just, on this note of the suspect, we had shown another picture, and I want to show it again. This is just a sort of a still photo of him on the street. You saw him running, and then it's a still photo. Juliet, I want to show it because it's hard to exactly say, but it looks like when you see this up close as it zooms in, that he has a very heavy beard.
You know, I mean, Aaron, I'd like to give something illuminating about that, but I think at this stage we should probably follow, you know, sort of the content of who he might have been in contact with and what that, you know, what that might have meant in terms of planning for this. I mean, the beard obviously might be interpreted one way in terms of he has ties to Islamic groups that may have been, religious groups, but it is just too hard to tell at this stage. I know people want answers early. It's the hardest thing for analysts to say. We just, you know, admit we just don't know at this stage. But it's obviously a piece of the picture right now. And as Bob said, you know, the fact that these were fake guns. This was a man who, suicide by cop in some way. He did not expect to live. It would be my sort of quick impression.
And all of you are going to stay with me. And the fact that he did live, obviously, is hugely significant. In so many of these horrible attacks that we've seen, Europe and elsewhere, there isn't someone to question afterwards. And in this case, there is. He is expected to survive. He is in a hospital in Manhattan right now. Our breaking news coverage continues. Security is tight. Officials pledging not to let up in the aftermath of this latest attack. There is a major parade and event beginning momentarily right here in New York City. And President Trump responding to the attack, calling the suspect sick and deranged, using the tragedy to call out ISIS. And breaking news on the Russia investigation this hour, a top person in the president's inner circle set to be interviewed by Robert Mueller's team.
Aaron Burnett out front, brought to you by Progressive, celebrating 5 years and more than 500 cars donated to vets. To learn more, visit keystoprogress.com.
Hey, man. Oh, nice man cave.
Nacho?
What? Stop it.
Mm-hmm. We've been saving a lot of money ever since we switched to Progressive.
This bar is legit.
And now we get an even bigger discount from bundling home and auto.
I can get used to this.
It might take a minute.
Swing and a miss. Slam dunk. Touchdown. Sports.
What's the value of capital? What's critical?
CNBC. Get yours.
That from last year, it's pretty much, I think it's night and day, but, you know, we still have levels to go. We still have
is to create not just wealth, but things that matter. Morgan Stanley.
He's brought us to the brink of nuclear.
Only one way to find out. Guess whose gravestone's gonna say, "Here lies an amazing gift giver."
Got any fours?
Up to us to do something.
We're looking at, it seems to me, a special counsel who has picked on some rather incidental characters.
Well,
your reaction?
Well, it goes clear back to 2005. This is you know, supposedly tax evasion and some failing to fill out forms and misleading the government from Paul Manafort and supposedly his assistant, Mr. Gates. But it goes from 2005 to 2015. So that has nothing to do with the Trump campaign. I think the president was right on target when he and the press secretary talked about this. So look, we have called for what we think was the real big news last week.
Right.
Not the leak, which led to these indictments that we heard about yesterday. But the real big news last week was that Secretary Clinton, her campaign, and the Democrat National Committee paid for this dossier. It looks like the dossier may have been the catalyst for doing the surveillance and doing the wiretapping and doing that. All this happened, paid for by the Clinton campaign, and of course, associated with that Uranium One deal 6-7 years ago, with the extortion and the bribery and the kickbacks and all that there. The person running the FBI at the time, when the FBI fails to tell Congress, fails to tell the country, and it looks like they didn't tell any of the agencies who were ultimately responsible for making the decision on the Uranium One deal. Bob Mueller is running the FBI when all that goes down, and Rod Rosenstein's at the Justice Department overseeing it. I think there's some irony there as well. So I'm glad we're going to look into those issues.
Do you think Rosenstein and Mueller should step aside, and the Inspector General at least?
I'm confident.
Broom said, "Sorry."
President Trump has released a statement on the New York City terror attack. This is obviously his home city, and he feels as strongly about it as anybody does who lives here. Let's go right to Chief National Correspondent Ed Henry, also a New Yorker, who joins us tonight live from the White House with that.
Well, that's right.
Good evening,
Good
Ed.
to see you, Martha. Interesting. The president has been getting updates, we're told, briefings from his chief of staff, retired General John Kelly, to stay on top of this situation. He's been tweeting about it, his normal mode of communication to get things out quickly. But now, as you say, just in the last couple of moments, a formal written statement from the president that goes into further depth. Our thoughts and prayers are with the victims of today's terrorist attack in New York City and their families. My administration will provide its full support to the New York City Police Department, including through a joint investigation with the FBI. We offer our thanks to the first responders who stopped the suspect and rendered immediate aid to the victims of this cowardly attack. The president says these brave men and women embody the true American spirit of resilience and courage. I will continue to follow developments closely. That just in from the president of the United States, of course, going back to the campaign of 2016, Martha, you know he has been very aggressive about saying we have to take the fight directly to ISIS and other terror organizations. This is now a terror attack on American soil that he is going to have to deal with. There are going to be massive ramifications in the days ahead, as you've been reporting. And note in that statement from the president that this is now a joint investigation, not just with the NYPD, but the FBI involved, which means the full resources of the federal government behind this as well, Martha.
All right, Ed, thank you so much. We'll go back to Ed at the White House shortly. Joining me now on the phone is New York City Congressman Peter King, member of the House Intelligence Committee. I'm also joined here in studio by General Jack Cheen, chairman of the Institute for the Study of War and a Fox News military analyst. General Cheen, let me go to you first here on set. What are your thoughts on what we saw today?
Well, certainly I'm a born and raised New Yorker, so you can't help but be affected by something like this. And regardless of where you are in America, you feel the same way in terms of people being needlessly killed like this. But when you put this thing in context, we've been dealing with radical Islam in America and in the world for 25 years. And the fact of the matter is, sadly to say, radical Islam has morphed into a global jihad in those 25 years. Al-Qaeda is thriving and growing. ISIS, despite the fact we just took Raqqa and their safe haven away from them, they managed to expand into 30 countries. They managed to grow, and they're a very resilient organization, from several hundred Iraqi fighters in 2012. On the internet, they recruited almost exclusively an entire international army. Some 18 months later, they grew to a size of 30,000. No organization has ever organized like that before. That internet operation, we refer to it as a virtual caliphate. Despite the physical caliphate is going away, the virtual caliphate is intact. So that organization is not dead. Their leaders are in southeast Syria, and they are still inspiring. Maybe somebody like this was inspired by them, or directing terrorist operations.
You raise such a great point, and I think about what happened in Washington today with Facebook and Google and Twitter and all of the concerns that were raised about the 2016 election, and that's a separate story. But how do we get at their form of communication and of recruiting and of reaching out over social media, which is ungoverned,
Yes.
Essentially?
And we're struggling with it, to be frank. I mean, actually taking down a physical caliphate for us militarily is easier than actually defeating them cyber. And that's the reality we're facing, dealing with privacy rights and the rest of it. Sitting right now before the Congress is a vote they're facing on 702, which is part of the Patriot Act, so that we can track terrorists who are talking to people in this country. There's people in the Congress that don't want that to happen. I mean, wake up. We've been in this war for 25 years. These guys are dead serious about it. And they're going to keep coming for us and coming for us. And I agree, you can't just shoot your way out of it, because it is an ideology and people are drawn to it. And you have to go out there and undermine that ideology. And it's complicated, but you've got to start. It takes with national leaders, it takes community leaders, it takes religious leaders. You've got to offer these young people an alternative to what they're reaching for, which is some purpose and meaning in their life. And they're drawn to this horrific ideology, but you got to have an alternative for them. And if there's a lack of political and social justice and economic opportunities in these communities where they come from, they're breeding grounds for it. And they're the leaders. And then they inspire somebody that lives in the United States who's actually living likely a middle-class life. In America, Muslim communities, the people in them are assimilated. Second generations off to college and come back to visit. That's America. But that's not what's happening around the world out there. And we've got to get after this thing comprehensively. This administration's got the potential to do it because they understand it and they want to do something about it. The previous administration disengaged. And when we disengaged from the Middle East and thought we could contain radical Islam, what we got is ISIS in return for that. And we've done the same thing by not resourcing Afghanistan properly.
You know, when I think about the sort of homegrown model, which this individual may be, it looks like he lived in Florida and in New Jersey. But one of the big question marks in his case already, there's a lot of them, is whether or not he traveled anywhere and came back. And it seems to me that that is one zone that should be more manageable. I think of Tamerlan Tsarnaev, who traveled, trained, and came back. And we've seen that again and again. How can we wrap our arms around that issue and say, if you go off to train in one of these camps, you're never coming back here?
Well, that's why we have a president who clearly understands that. And he wants people to be vetted who are coming out of these known areas that are growing grounds for terrorism, and particularly in places where there's no mechanism there to be able to check on the people who are applying for this country. That's the whole issue, and why people don't understand that.
And that's what the president has been very outspoken and forceful about. I want to bring in Pete King, Congressman Peter King, who joins us on the phone tonight. Congressman, welcome. You obviously spent a lot of time on this topic, and now it has hit home in a brutal reality tonight.
It really has. Let me just say at the outset, I agree with everything that General Cheen said and also what Bernie Kerik said before. This is a vicious enemy, and the NYPD is the best in the world at what they do, working with the FBI in New York. They do an outstanding job. This type of attack with the vehicle, which is not a lethal weapon by itself, it's not a gun, it's not a knife, it's not an explosive device. It's so important we check on this person's record, because unless a person has a terrorist record, unless they've been on the internet, unless they've been using other forms of social media, unless they've been talking to people in the community about carrying out terrorist acts, it's virtually impossible to stop them. And this is every FBI and every cop's nightmare, this type of attack, which is low cost to the enemy, and yet it can be terribly lethal. And it shows how evil and diabolical they are. And it also shows how wrong the critics have been over the years, who have been critical of the NYPD for, they say, too much surveillance, for overstressing this issue. The only way we can stop it locally is through increased surveillance, neighborhood surveillance, community surveillance. That means using undercovers. It means using informants. It means going through every bit of social media that we can. And so any event, by the way, the police officer who shot that terrorist today, what a hero he is. Yeah. I mean, if he had not gotten another hero, what might have happened?
Incredible, and you can see in some of the video that we saw today, individuals kind of, running behind a car trying to get an angle on this guy as he's darting around. And I think about the bravery of those individuals, and one of them may have been that police officer. It's hard to tell on that video. But, Congressman King, I also think back to when you had a panel on counterterrorism in Washington, and it was titled something about Islamic extremism in the United States. They wouldn't even let you call it that, and wanted to open it up to other forms of extremism that could be discussed on the panel. And what General Jack Keane is saying, and Bernard Kerik, the former police commissioner, is wake up. The country needs to understand that we are literally and figuratively under attack. And until we really deal with it in that way and take it on, and I have to say that President Trump dealt with it that way during the campaign, clearly calling it out for what it is, and we've been through, a long period where we weren't allowed to say that. How do we accomplish that goal?
Yeah, listen, all violence is wrong, all murder is wrong, but what makes Islamist terrorism unique right now, it's a worldwide movement. It's a movement that has tens of thousands of supporters around the world, including here in the United States. And with travel being what it is today, as you said, people go to Syria to get trained, they can come back. Europeans who can come into our country without applying for a visa, they've gone to Syria, they get trained, they go back to Europe, they can come into the country. We have people here in this country, as we've seen, just on Long Island where I live, we've had any number of terrorist plots stopped and people arrested, people serving long prison sentences. We had one person actually go to Afghanistan. So as Bernie said before, they're going to kill us unless we kill them first. And we have to stop being politically correct. We have to stop being apologetic. You're right. I had those hearings 6.5 years ago. You would have thought that I was Adolf Hitler, the way I was being attacked. And yet, of the 3 witnesses I had, 2 of them were Muslims, and one was an African-American whose son was a Muslim convert. They were there to talk about the danger and the damage that Islam has caused to Muslim communities in this country. 99% of the people are good people, but the fact is there are elements that are dangerous to our country, and the community has to cooperate more. And I've said this a million times, when the FBI was going after the mafia, they went into the Italian-American community. When they were going after the Westies, it was the Irish-American community. If you're going after Islamist terrorism, you have to monitor the Muslim community. That's where it's coming from, and that's the reality. You have to stop being politically correct, stop being apologetic, and realize there's an enemy that wants to kill us in the most diabolical way. This guy today killing innocent people on a bike path, people standing around, attacking a school bus with disabled kids. What an absolute disgrace.
Congressman Peter King, General Jack Cheen, thank you very much to both of you for being with us on a very tough night for America, as the first vehicular attack in a major American city turns us to another page of confronting terrorism in America. We have breaking coverage as we get new details about this terrorist coming in, where he's from, his age, the condition that he is in at a New York City hospital tonight. All of that straight ahead.
In the modern world, it pays to switch things up. You can switch and save time. You can switch and save worry. You can switch and save hassle. And when you switch to Esurance, you can save time, worry, hassle, and, yep, money. In fact, drivers who switched from Geico to Esurance saved hundreds. So you might want to think about pulling the old switcheroo. That's auto and home insurance for the modern world. Esurance, an Allstate company. Click or call.
When you have type 2 diabetes, you manage your A1C, but you also have a higher risk of heart attack or stroke. Non-insulin Victoza lowers A1C and now reduces cardiovascular risk.
Victoza lowers my A1C and blood sugar better than the leading branded pill.
And for people with type 2 diabetes treating cardiovascular disease, Victoza is now approved to lower the risk of major cardiovascular events such as heart attack, stroke, or death.
And while it isn't for weight loss, Victoza may help you lose some weight.
Victoza is not for people with type 1 diabetes or diabetic ketoacidosis. Do not take Victoza if you have a personal or family history of medullary thyroid cancer, multiple endocrine neoplasia syndrome type 2, or if you are allergic to Victoza or any of its ingredients. Stop taking Victoza and get medical help right away if you get symptoms of a serious allergic reaction such as rash, swelling, difficulty breathing or swallowing. Serious side effects may happen, including pancreatitis. So stop taking Victoza and call your doctor right away if you have severe pain in your stomach area. Tell your doctor your medical history. Gallbladder problems have happened in some people. Tell your doctor right away if you get symptoms. Taking Victoza with the sulfonylurea or insulin may cause low blood sugar. Common side effects are nausea, diarrhea, vomiting, decreased appetite, indigestion, and constipation. Side effects can lead to dehydration, which may cause kidney problems.
Ask your doctor about Victoza.
I finally figured out what car to get. Now, where to find the best deal?
You know, why don't I help?
What's that?
Car Gurus. Color?
Silver. Car Gurus?
Low miles, 2 grand below market value, 5-star dealer rating. Ooh, I'm beat.
Let's do it your way, then.
I heard that.
Car Gurus. Find great deals from top-rated dealers near you at cargurus.com.
Whatever you're doing to stay healthy, you might be missing something. Your eyes. That's why there's Ocuvite. It helps replenish nutrients your eyes can lose as you age. Nourish your eyes to help keep them healthy. Ocuvite. Be good to your eyes.
When you have a cold, stuff happens. shut down cold symptoms fast with maximum strength Alka-Seltzer Plus liquid gels.
Hey, hon. We gotta go. Come on. Thanks, Mom. Principal, we can help you plan for that.
Fox News Channel on Sirius XM. Your favorite shows on Channel 114. Plus, every story, every 15 minutes. Fox News headlines 24/7 at Channel 115.
Unfortunately, this is not the first time that an attack of this nature has occurred, as we all know. In fact, terror attacks where a vehicle becomes a weapon is becoming very common. Trace Gallagher is live in our West Coast newsroom with the backstory on those cases, which we remember too well. Trace, good evening.
Good evening, Martha. ISIS and al-Qaeda have long been telling their sympathizers to use a combination of cars and knives, and those appear to be the common denominators in most of these types of attacks, like back in August in Barcelona when a 22-year-old Spanish citizen drove a van into a crowd at the famed La Rambla shopping district, killing 13, injuring more than 100. The attacker then got out of his van, stabbed and killed another woman, and yelled Allahu Akbar before police shot and killed him. In June, 3 Islamic terrorists used a van to plow into pedestrians on the London Bridge, then got out and began stabbing people in pubs and bars along the bridge. In all, 7 were killed, 48 injured. In March, a British citizen who pledged allegiance to ISIS drove into pedestrians along the Westminster Bridge in central London, killing 4, injuring 50. That attacker got out of his vehicle and fatally stabbed an off-duty police officer before being shot and killed by police. We have also had deadly vehicle attacks in Paris, Sweden, Berlin, and don't forget in this country last November when an Ohio State student of Somali descent plowed his car into a crowd of students and then stabbed them with a butcher knife, injuring 11. The suspect was shot and killed. And of course, the deadliest vehicle attack happened in July of 2016 in Nice, France, when a Tunisian national drove a large truck through a crowd of people celebrating Bastille Day, killing 86, injuring more than 500. Recently, an ISIS magazine included an article that showed the best kinds of vehicles to use for attacks and even suggested that sympathizers rent them, which caught the attention of New York police. Watch.
We went and did extensive outreach to the truck rental business. We visited over 148 truck rental locations in this area, the obvious ones, U-Haul, Ryder, Home Depot, etc., and talked about suspicious indicators, ways to come forward.
And of course, police say today's attacker used a Home Depot rental truck. Al-Qaeda has many times called trucks the ultimate mowing machines. Martha.
Thank you, Trace. All right, here with more tonight, Karl Rove, former Deputy Chief of Staff to President George W. Bush and a Fox News contributor, and Bob Strang, CEO of Investigative Management Group, who also served as co-chair of the New York State post-9/11 Anti-Terrorism Task Force. Gentlemen, welcome. Good to have both of you here. Karl, let me start with you in terms of White House response. And I just want to mention that the First Lady is in New York City. We just received word a little while ago that she is here until Wednesday, and we saw that she tweeted out her thoughts and prayers, of course, to everybody who was affected. This is her hometown as well, and she is concerned, obviously, as they monitor the situation. But, you know, how does the White House deal with this kind of situation, Karl?
Well, after 9/11, we created the Counterterrorism Center and located in Washington. And my sense is the Homeland Security Advisor inside the White House, the Chief of Staff, were probably in very close communication with the Counterterrorism Center almost from the moment that this event occurred, and probably brought in intelligence agencies. This is, after all, an Uzbek national who came to the United States in 2010. Uzbekistan is the most populous of the former Soviet Muslim republics in Central Asia. About 90% of the population are Sunni Muslims. It is generally peaceful, but it has an Islamic extremist movement, the the Islamic movement of Uzbekistan, the IMU, which has officially aligned itself with ISIS. And so there probably already begun efforts to check out what kind of connections he might have had, if any, to that movement. But the White House has at its disposal, through the Homeland Security Department and the Counterterrorism Center and the Homeland Security Advisor inside the White House, new means of communication and tools that were not available on 9/11. And my suspicion is all of those were heavily used this afternoon and this evening.
Yeah, no doubt. Good information. Bob Strang, let me go to you. In your work in terms of counterterrorism in New York State, you look at this situation, and this has really been everybody's nightmare, you know, that we would see this kind of thing here, and now we have.
Right, Martha. It's look at the potential of something like this. All of our avenues in New York City, across our country, in malls and bus stops and outside schools, this is continuing to be a problem, not only around the world, but here in our own country. And we've learned this through intelligence. In New York, we've been able to stop 15 attacks since 9/11. Tonight is the first time where someone has successfully gotten through and had this type of terrorist attack in our city. So I think if you look at the big picture and look that the intelligence for the most part is working, if you look at our surveillances, social media, the different things that we're doing to try to preempt these situations, we've been very successful. Unfortunately, a situation like this, there's not much you can do. It's almost the last resort. The police officer on the street who has the gun, who can stop him. So you have your intelligence first, you have your military, your enforcement operations, and then your last line of defense, if you will, the cops or the good guys.
And they were out probably in more force than usual.